Kathy, she's great at the greeting committee. I said, you're great at the greeting committee.
Welcome.
Hi, Jamie.
Okay.
Good, how are you?
Airplane. Oh. That's it.
When's the flight?
Big plan.
Don't think I'll get any more.
So, you can always hold them on.
That's right. Yeah, no more. He's been a little busy today, though.
Advocating. Getting people services, they have a raise that, you know, are scarce and gatekeepers and.
I'm not that tall.
Oh, okay. But thank you for, making me feel something.
Setting it up a meeting, I made it sound.
Okay.
You answered it down within, yeah. I don't remember how to
And it's also for the
Oh, I probably
So you guys have
You probably need
formal
both.
from
I can't see it.
Congratulations. That is
You were there? Yeah.
So that's why you're one of the best. So it's possible. Now we know what's possible.
Bill,
every day.
when you did your presentation, will they be able to?
Email.
Yeah.
There's two, okay.
Yeah,
Jerry,
you just have to be persistent.
Yeah.
Michael, you did the presentation?
It's not for me.
Yeah.
No, maybe it is.
Is that suitable?
Yeah, get all this, no, April.
Yes, we've got the volume up here.
Good.
Okay. That's
There is
great.
the date, so I've now got to get all the documentation together. We've got most of it done. Yeah.
Oh, good.
We got corn.
Okay.
No, they printed it for me. Versus
I read through it, so I'm hoping
I'm just hearing an echo, I assume it was.
Yeah.
Gail, this is Michael,
I don't think it's through me.
We're still going, Michelle.
Oh, okay.
Figure out dinner.
Yeah,
Great customer.
yeah. Jeremy said it was great, he's, yeah, we see here, just show me some pictures, but I haven't
Give
seen
me
it.
a picture of this one. I'll see if we get a quick picture.
Yeah.
How are
This
you?
email.
I'm doing fine. Yeah. How are you guys?
Great. You? Good.
I sit at the table.
Can you remind me, are you in
No, I'm from another office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah. Did you take it? I'm starting our plating planning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
thanks.
saying I'm going in August.
And thanks to meet you.
Very cool. I know I was How do you manage that when you work on the are you secretary? Can't remember. So that's right. I don't know. Chelsea. Yes, Chelsea. Charlotte's. Okay. Hey everyone. Everybody is Thanks for joining us. Okay, I'm going to call the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness to order for today's meeting. Thank you everyone for being here. We have a few members joining us on Zoom today. Thank you for being here as well, and I believe Councillor Armstrong will be joining in a little bit. First up is the introduction of late items. Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's just a couple of things. We're going to be moving item 6C, which is the assistive hearing device update, and that's going to be moved to item 7B, and it'll be a verbal update by Ms. Osborne. And then also just adding an item to the other business section under number 8, which is to update the committee on a committee member's resignation.
Okay, thank you. So may I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Thank you, Tammy, and seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Motion carries, thank you. And we have one set of minutes to adopt from our January 10th meeting. We have a motion for the adoption of those minutes. Moved by Alexandria, seconded by Sean. All in favor? That carries, thank you so much. And now we have some council communications. Karen, you're going to give us an update on what council's been up to.
Sure, just at the last meeting on January 15th, there was 2 motions that passed, and they went forward to council, and they were both unanimously supported by council. So I know that for item 1 that process is underway now, and I believe Ms. Osborne has a bit of an update on item 2, which is about the motion that was made about working with the school district.
So representatives from the Regional District of Nanaimo Transit, as well as this School District 68 and City of Nanaimo aquatic staff met via Zoom to review some of the recommendations and requests to look at solutions for how to better work that area. Oh, and I believe Jamie Rose was actually at that session as well. So did you have something to add, Jamie?
I don't know. We had a constructive conversation about how to better integrate transit with the access to ND and the Aquatic Center, and I think there's further conversations to be had.
So I think, it's just good to know that everybody was open and ready to meet and discuss what we could do to improve this particular location, so.
Excellent, okay, moving on to presentations. We have a presentation about the Regional District of Nanaimo Transit System. So thank you so much to the RDN staff who've joined us today, and this is
I could just briefly,
Mr. Sims.
Yeah, thank you. I could briefly introduce our colleagues from the Regional District of Nanaimo Transit. That's Lainey and Michael, both from, just to give an update on the state of transit. And there was, I think this originally came from some discussion that Councillor Armstrong had around the new fare system that's coming into place. So they'll touch on that, as well as an overview of accessibility in transit in general. So if you can take the podium and take it away.
Thank you
very much.
Podium are important. Good afternoon / evening, everybody. My name is Michael Getchell. I'm the manager of transit operations. This is my esteemed colleague, Lady Stevenson. She's the superintendent for planning and scheduling. One of the most important parts in the transit system itself. So I'm happy to be here presenting with Lainey today. I guess I can just change the slide, can't I think. Okay. We are delighted to be invited here to be given the opportunity to present to the City of Nanaimo Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness. Today, we're going to touch on just a couple of subjects. We were told that the fare structure and the tickets and the paper tickets are of interest to you folks, so I would really like to touch on that. But first, I want to give you a brief overview of the RDN system itself. And then Lainey's going to go into the fare structure, payment options, and then we'll open it up to questions if you have anything that you need to ask us or anything else. Okay, so the system overview. There we go. So the RDN is comprised of 4 municipalities, 7 electoral areas, and operates in the territory of the Coast Salish Native people. We work with all of our partners on transit priorities for their areas, providing advice and recommendations on transit-related matters. Like all other public transit agencies in BC, we are in an operating agreement with BC Transit. This agreement is the guiding document for both parties regarding our service and financials to meet the agreed upon objectives. They're like the big brother, I guess, if you want to put it that way. Currently, we have 74 buses in the fleet and a workforce of approximately 150 individuals. This is broken down into 15 custom transit buses, 4 R-Box or community buses, and 55 conventional CNG buses, so the big 40-foots. Our 150 employees are broken down into conventional bus operators, conventional dispatchers, custom transit operators, custom transit dispatchers, road support agents, and maintenance employees, which keep our fleet on the road and safe for all of our passengers. Our conventional bus system, which is a fixed route system, operates 137,800 hours annually with the 55 CNG buses that we have. The custom transit system currently operates 27,500 hours annually, and that uses the 15 custom transit vehicles that we have. And we also operate 20 fixed transit routes from Deep Bay to Duncan, and that includes the interregional service of the 70 NCX. Accessibility. So I just want to briefly go over some of the accessibility features that we have on all the standard CNG buses. And then we can touch on custom transit if you guys are interested in speaking that as well. But for low floor conventional transit buses, all sorts of different accessibility features. So our entire fleet of 40-foot buses are low floor, which means they're closer to the ground, so it lessens the gap between the curb and the bus. It allows for less strenuous onboarding and offboarding. It assists passengers when carrying items boarding the bus, and may be requested when and where the customer needs it. The buses also have a kneeling feature that is very complementary to the low floor bus. So the operator is in control of the kneeling feature. Upon request, at any location, at any time, you can request that the bus is lowered and the ramp is deployed for you if necessary to help with any mobility issues entering or exiting the bus. Courtesy seating. So courtesy seating is the blue seating in the front of the bus. It is meant for people that have mobility issues, and it's more difficult to get further down the bus. So those seats are primarily reserved for those that require it. So it doesn't just need to be a mobility issue. It can be a lot of different reasons that people require that. It could be a temporary injury or something like that, where it prevents them from accessing the rear of the bus. Although it's not a law or a rule that they have to give up the seat to people, but most of the time if you ask, because you need, people will be kind enough to leave the seat and you can have the accessible seating. It's also there for mobility device securement. So some of the seats do come up, which eliminates some of the seating, but allows mobility devices to be secured for the comfort of the passenger. And then we have audible and visual stop announcements. So these are really so all of our passengers have access to the same information while they're on the vehicle. So the next stop, currently with the new system that we have, it's actually the next 3 stops that you're seeing on a very large screen. It's very accessible for those with visual or hearing issues. Please remember though, when it comes to the courtesy seating, that even though the operator is in charge of the bus, they can only request that somebody leaves that seating as well. Okay, they're not, unfortunately they can't rip somebody out of the seat, so please do keep that in mind. And then transit infrastructure improvements. So with every new project that transit or any other development is really involved in now, there's accessibility requirements that we have to meet. So all new infrastructure, including the downtown exchange or any other exchanges, facilities, or anything else that we put in, are going to have to meet accessibility standards. So moving forward, we should be able to meet those standards and continue servicing all of the public and our employees. So that is my portion of the presentation. Now I'm going to hand you over to Lainey, who is much better at this than I am. So please enjoy.
Not at all. Thanks for having us, and I just want to reiterate that. I'm going to go into maybe the main reason why we're here today, which is to talk a little bit about our fare structure and our new electronic fare payment system, which is UMO. That's how it's pronounced, not UMO, it's UMO. So I'll just go over the fare structure. Currently, this is probably really small on the screen, so I'll do my best to do an overview for you. Right now we have both traditional fare products and electronic fare products. So the electronic fare products came in a about November, I believe, when we got the UMO validators installed on all of our buses. But we still have the traditional fare products, so that would be like your paper passes, so monthly passes and tickets. There are many different discounts that are provided within our fare structure. So it's $2.50 per ride, but you get discounts on monthly passes, and then there's further discounts for seniors and students, and then of course kids under 12 ride for free. UMO and the monthly passes are slightly different, where the monthly passes are month by month basis. So for December or for January, for February, for example, and the UMO electronic fare passes are 30 days, and they're 30 days from the first day that you tap to use that. So it could be mid-month to the next mid-month. So the UMO provides a little bit more flexibility that way. There is also a BC Bus Pass program, which provides passes for persons with disabilities, and low-income seniors, which is defined by the province, and it is a program that's we don't monitor that. It's held directly through the province. It gives you your own bus pass, which is different from our fare products. BC Transit is encouraging a shift away from the traditional fare products, so the paper passes, the tickets, towards an electronic fare system. However, we have no date of when we are going to be getting rid of our paper products, but I believe that this was the concern and maybe going to be a topic of discussion about switching over to the electronic fare system. I do have a video for you which describes UMO and how it's used. I'm not sure if we want to watch it. I think it could be helpful. It's only about 2.5 minutes. I don't know if it's going to work. I wonder. I don't know if somebody. Oh, somebody's got control. Perfect.
Hi, I'm going to teach you how to use the reloadable UMO card. With UMO, you get to select your best choice of payment methods based on your lifestyle and travel habits. I like having a fare product to hold on to, so I use the card. To start, pick up a reloadable UMO card for free from a nearby vendor. A list of vendors can be found on your transit system's fare page under Where to Buy. With the reloadable UMO card, you get to decide how to load your card. In person, through a UMO vendor, online at ca.umopass.com, or over the phone by calling UMO support at 877-380-8181 toll-free. Your UMO card can be continually reused and reloaded with your fare product, cash balances, and passes. Your favorite fare products can even be set to renew, so you'll never be without a fare to ride. One thing I love about UMO is that it will always select the best fare for me. So if I have a pass and cash balance loaded to my card, UMO will apply my pass before using up a cash balance. In transit systems that offer a day pass, your UMO card will cap your fare after your second trip, meaning you'll never pay more than the value of a day pass. Or, if you are in a transit system that offers a transfer, UMO will recognize that you are traveling within the 90-minute transfer window, and you'll continue to travel for free on your second bus. No matter how you choose to load your card or what you put on it, it is recommended that you register your UMO card to ensure your funds are safe if misplaced, stolen, or damaged. To register it, all you need to do is visit ca.umopass.com or call 877-380-8181 and create an account with a unique username and password. When you're ready to go with UMO, look for the UMO validator near the driver. You'll know you're good to go when you hear the beep.
Do you want to just move the mic a little bit closer?
Is that better? Can you hear me okay? Better?
It's not on because we were saving the battery.
Oh.
I know, I realized it after. It was in here early, so Michael had a great booming voice.
I've never had to use microphones, so.
Testing.
There we go. Sorry about that for
Oh,
anyone who
great.
couldn't hear me. Hopefully this will be a bit better. I'll go into maybe just a little bit more detail about the electronic fare system. So you can either have an app on your phone or you can have a physical card. There's one or the other, and you can either reload it on your phone or you can reload it online or over the phone, or you can go into a store, any of our vendors who sell UMO, and reload the card that way. I also wanted to touch, they said it in the video, but day passes as well. I didn't touch on that when I was talking about the fare structure, but we have day passes, they're $5, so the cost of 2 trips, $2.50 per trip. And then we also have our interregional service to Duncan that has a little bit of a different fare structure because it is interregional, so it's $7.50 per ride, and there are also monthly passes and a super pass that gets you the NCX and rides within the Cowichan Valley Regional District Transit System, as well as the Regional District of Nanaimo's transit system. So there's a lot of different options depending on your needs for travel. Which brings me to the next point, which is that we're going through a fare review this year. Where did we decide we were pointing? There we go. Yeah, this year we're going through a fare review with BC Transit. So we're going to be reviewing our fare structure and taking a look at similar sized transit systems to see how much they're charging, and also analyzing some of our data and travel patterns to see if we should adjust any of our fare structure. So right now we're working with BC Transit to do a little bit of the background analysis, and the next stage this spring will be we'll go out and engage with varying riders or potential riders on how our fare structure is working now, and maybe any potential options that we might come up with through the analysis. So there is, options, or there may be opportunity for our current fare structure to change slightly over the next couple of years. So that's all that we had for you. Thanks so much for, again, giving us the time to give this presentation. We'll be available for questions for anything that's come up through the presentation.
So, Wendy?
Of course, I have questions. So, the Compass Pass, will that be able to tap, or do you still just need to show it?
So there's a validator on the bus that you tap your card onto, or your mobile phone, depending on if you have the card on your phone or if you have the physical card. So it will be a tap on.
Okay.
Bay?
Yeah, hi. I'm talking about the Compass card, which people with disabilities and seniors get through the ministry. It is TAP compatible in Vancouver. I'm wondering, is that going to be made TAP compatible with the UMO system?
That's something I think we may have to take back and come back with an answer.
Yeah, we may have to go back to BC Transit and ask about that. We're currently in phase 1 of the UMO electronic fare system, which is just the card tapping on and off. Phase 2 is going to be credit card and debit card validation. And I wonder if maybe as part of phase 2, we might also be able to validate the BC bus passes as well. But we can get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I'll go to Linda and then Richard.
Hi. I'm assuming that what you call your custom service is HandyDart?
That's correct.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. One around price of tickets. You offer a 10 ticket discount, which isn't offered at HandyDart, a day pass, which isn't offered at HandyDart, a seniors discount, which isn't offered at HandyDart. So I'm wondering why that is. And my second question is about availability of rides on HandyDart. The ridership is increasing. The service has been decreased. There used to be 2 buses on a Saturday. Now there's 1.5. There's only 1 on Sunday. The rides end very early in the day, and as ridership increases, it's becoming virtually impossible to get rides. So there you go.
Thank you for those comments. I'm not sure if Michael, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I can touch on that for a second, if that's okay.
As stated in the presentation, you'll see that conventional transit had almost 140,000 service hours directed towards it, while HandyDart or custom transit, as we like to call it, is just under 28,000 hours. We would like to see that expanded, but that is something we have to work with our BC Transit partners on to have it expanded. The fare structure when it comes to Handy Dart, I will have to get back to you on the specifics of some of those. I don't want to provide you the wrong information, and I want to get back with the proper information on that. But as for Handy Dart, I will tell you that we are fully aware of the strain on the system. Fortunate or not, Lainey is going to be taking over Handy Dart here in the next week or so and looking after the operations of Handy Dart. So she's going to be a lot more versed in what actually happens there and why we're backlogged. But it comes down to personnel and being allotted the hours. So we work with our partners all the time to try and ensure that the service is there for those riders. And I do completely understand, and I apologize. I'll apologize because I feel bad that we're not able to support all the riders that require Handy Dart. But we are progressively working on that with our partners. So other than that, I really don't have an update on what's upcoming with Handy Dart. But as we progress through, I'd love to be able to give you guys updates as expansions and stuff happen.
Just before I go to Richard, I'm just going to ask a follow-up question on that, because the RTN had asked BC Transit for an expansion of hours. Was an expansion to the Handy Dart service part of that ask that hasn't been provided from BC Transit?
Yeah, we requested 2,000 hours.
2,000 hours.
Yeah, 2,000 hours for Handy Dart.
We're still waiting to hear whether or not we got our expansion for both conventional and for Handy Darts. We'll be able to release that information very shortly.
BC Transit's fiscal year is different from ours, so it takes some time, after we put out the plan and stuff like that for everything to be authorized. So we're still waiting.
Can you talk into the microphone?
Sure thing. My apologies.
Oh, yes. I'm not sure if you heard that, but we're just waiting for the final word from BC Transit on whether or not we are going to receive our expansion hours for both conventional and the custom transit. But we did request 2,000 hours for additional service to expand on evenings and weekends and for statutory holidays. So kind of everything that you just touched on, Linda, we're advocating for, but of course it's an ask to the province, and there's only so many hours to go around the province, and ultimately they get to decide where those hours get to go. So we are definitely advocating hard for it. Just on another piece of the fare structure that you brought up, I just wanted to add a little bit more history and context. And in the last fare review that we did, which was about 6 years ago, we actually brought the Handy Dart fare even to the conventional fare, so $2.50, which was great. But you're right, there's more work that needs to be done, and we're really grateful that we get to go through a fare review this year. And these are going to be really important things to bring up to see what we can do and maybe creating more equity there between the conventional side and the customer Handy Dart side.
Richard.
Hi everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I know in Vancouver, when they brought in the latest tap cards for transit users, the Canadian National Institute of the Blind had worked with BC Transit to get these cards essentially embedded into the CNIB card itself. So the chip is available for any person who is vision impaired to be able to tap at any one of the terminals and such on the buses, but it was designed to be able to allow people to get through those SkyTrain stations. I'm kind of wondering if the card that Nanaimo will be getting is going to be similar to that and also embedded into the CNIB cards, or if that has not been a consideration yet.
I don't think it has to be addressed.
Okay.
So the UMO cards are I've already started looking into some other uses for the UMO cards, employee passes and stuff like that, where we can tap onto vehicles and all that. So after talking to BC Transit, they feel that there's areas where we're able to use it for other things. So whether that be, tap on Compass cards or whatever, however that rolls out, I from what I understand is it's a possibility, but we're not quite there yet. So UMO is just rolling out in the province. We're still kind of working out some of the kinks in it. It hasn't even rolled out across all the properties in the province yet. So I think once we have a better understanding of how it actually works within the entirety of the system, then we can start working on, those progressive things like ensuring that UMO cards are CNIB compatible and Compass card compatible and stuff like that. But those discussion hasn't actually started yet, and it's because of the time frame we're in. We're still kind of in the introductory phase in BC for UMO. So.
I'm going to go to Sean and then Wendy for a second question.
I was glad to hear about the requested expansion to hours. This isn't regarding Handy Dart, this is just regarding the regular lines. Is that the main barrier I see in working with people with developmental disabilities is either, these are primarily people who are working, is that it's either not early enough or late enough. Mm-hmm. So is that what's included within the expanded hours on, I would say, key routes? That go from either south to north end or that sort of thing, buses that go, or is it more about more stops within the existing timeframes?
So something we didn't mention as part of our presentation was our transit redevelopment strategy, which lays out what we want to achieve over the next 5 years. Unfortunately, it's been delayed for the last 2 years because we didn't get any expansion. We're hopeful that this year is going to be year one, or next year rather, if we get approved for our expansions. That being said, to play catch up, rather than asking for the strategies that would have been in year one, we've tried to combine strategies or the additional hours from multiple years. So we've kind of combined year 1 and 2, and we're asking for about 10,000 hours of expansion for our conventional transit system. And that's going to span over a number of strategies. One of the ones is to do our rapid line, which is currently our Route 50, to get more frequency, and that would also improve the service span. So that one right now, it goes from downtown up to Woodgrove, kind of through the spine of our city, and then eventually we'll actually expand down to the Southgate Plaza. And then we have a couple of other strategies that will also kind of smooth out service and increase our span throughout the system. So hopefully we'll be able to address some of the concerns of trying to get a little bit later service or kind of early morning and late service to key locations through that expansion.
Thank you.
Wendy.
As you know, I went and spoke to these wonderful people with my daughter and another self-advocate. We went there, and one of the things we spoke about was, these are all negative, I'm sorry, securing the seat. The bus driver refused to secure the seat. Where's the other one? And one thing it's important for people to do is, if you have any issues with the bus driver, don't talk to the bus driver, report it. Get the number and the route of it. And what was the other thing I spoke about? Handy Dart. The Handy Dart, you did tell me what to do. I think it was approach Compass, so you can use the Compass pass on the Handy Dart, so there's no cost. Is that right?
Yeah, from my recollection, Wendy, that's fairly accurate. I know we directed towards the provincial entity that looks after the Compass cards, so they would have all the say on how their card is used and who accepts it and stuff like that. So
I don't think that we have the validators. Maybe Darren, correct me, but I don't think our validators, the UMO validators, are on the Handy Dart buses.
No.
That's correct. Yeah. Sorry. Was that your question? Is UMO
No,
available
it was
on
a
Handy Dart?
statement and just letting these guys know what we went and spoke to you about. There was a whole bunch of other things, but these are just some of the highlights.
Yeah, so it's really their kind of decision on how the Compass card is used. They're a provincial entity, BC Transit is a provincial entity, so for them to work together is a lot easier than us trying to get it on board, right? Because we're a singular municipality that would want it, and the bigger provincial entity is going to have a little more sway than we do.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And Jocelyn.
One of my biggest concerns in a city that's growing as fast as ours is with restrictions, with limitations on transit, is the populations who want those front seats come into conflict more and more often, and the people who need it who don't know that it's there for them, or as a previous member of this committee brought up in the last round, that sometimes drivers don't know what disability looks like, or won't put the ramp out. So my concern is, are your operators being trained about how to navigate that situation, in which case, because it could be hours before I had another accessible bus to take, especially on the weekend, but someone with a stroller may, how do we navigate those situations when there's a real equity question?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. I'm not going to say that I don't know this is has been a problem. I'm not sure it's just becoming a problem. Whether it's been, I've only been here since June of last year, so I've only got that perspective. The agencies that I'm used to coming from, accessibility issues come forefront. So and it comes down to training and policy, basically, right? A lot of the policies that we pull from are from BC Transit. So those courtesy seats have been indicated that they are, you can request to have them, but no one can force anybody to move or do anything, right? And that's where the complication and the conflict comes from, I'm sure. I would be frustrated if I needed the seat and somebody did not, and they wouldn't get out for me. So I empathize with that. We've had some struggles with accessibility in that, in the last year or so. I've worked diligently with the training, or my supervisor for training and development, or supervisor of transit operations, that looks after training and development, to make sure that we are looking at the policies and the procedures and the guidelines, and we're incorporating that into our training procedures, and we're training our operators to act appropriately and not to judge. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that I've recognized is prejudgment. It's not necessarily I'm not necessarily just talking about our operating staff, but prejudgment of individuals with perceived or non-perceived disabilities. From personal experience, we cannot, I can't tell you whether you do or don't, right? That's for you to tell me and ask for the assistance that you require, which is exactly what we tell the operators. And if they're maybe not performing their duties, or lowering the bus when you ask, or putting out the ramp when you ask, or maybe saying something that doesn't sit well with you, I would encourage you to let us know right away, the management team, get a hold of the administrators, talk to us, and we do take it very seriously if you're not being accommodated the way you need to be. We do address the operators individually and as a group when it comes to this stuff. So we're trying to get the word out as much as possible, including with trainers doing face-to-face touch bases with the operators, going over accessibility issues and all of that stuff that they really need to know to be out there, because they are the representative for the company, and they need to make sure that we're accommodating the public, because we are a public service, and all the members of the public as they needed to be accommodated for.
It was good to hear.
Did that answer your question?
It does. And it's one of those, there's no perfect answer questions except more transit, because then ultimately no one has to police who sits where, because there's enough seats for everybody. But I know in Vancouver when that happened, or I lived in the suburbs in New Westminster, back then when it was the BC Coalition for People with Disabilities, they had an arrangement with I don't even remember, I think it was BC Transit back then, that if someone got refused because the seats were filled, they would call them a cab, and the purpose was not the cab, was that it had to be reported to the garage. And that, so they could keep stats on how often it was happening to see what the problems were. I'm not at all saying the problem is so bad that we need that here, but what I hear from our members is that occasionally on crucial times when there isn't as much service, they're losing the chance to, they're one chance of the day, or they're one of few, and so it has higher stakes than it would normally.
I really appreciate that comment, and I believe that is something that can be relayed onto our staff to provide a little empathy and have them look at the individual that's standing outside their door when it's raining, rather than looking at the inside of their bus and figuring out whether they can squeeze another person in, right? We do move people. We're not a garbage service. We're a people service, so we need to treat you like people. Right?
I'm going to go to Tanya, and then I think we will probably need to move on just in the interest of time.
Yeah, and to just quickly follow up on Jocelyn's point, one of the problems with that also is calling people a cab is there aren't necessarily as many cabs to call anymore. I know that I've been using cabs for about 10 years for professional reasons, and it gets harder and harder to find an accessible one. Now, I'm lucky that I can do a transfer and use a regular one, but if you've got can't do that because of the type of chair you have or the type of disability you have, that's a problem.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for all the excellent questions from the committee, and I appreciate hearing from Wendy, because it sounds like RDN staff are very accessible if you do have questions and comments in between, so thank you for that. Appreciate the presentation today, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Have a great day.
So next up we have a presentation by John Van Horn, our Director of Human Services, about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We'll see how well this works. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present here. As Councillor Eastman said, I'm John Van Horn. My pronouns are he and him. And for the last 8.5 years, I've been the Director of Human Resources here in the city. I apologize in advance because I've got notes here that I'm going to be reading fairly extensively from. And the reason being is I did a dry run through with Laura Clarkson, his opinion on this, and I very much value what she said. It was really good. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything out from that and cover everything she had. Is it easier if I just handhold, or is that better?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Melissa.
Okay, thank you. Well done, Melissa.
We're going to hold our questions for the end of the presentation. So if you put your hand up on the screen, I'll take a list of questions and go from there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, because I think that's key. The presentation is going to cover off a lot of what we do in human resources, and it might be that your question is answered a little later on in the presentation. So a little bit first about the Human Resources Department here. We've got 13 staff in total when we're fully staffed up. We have one vacancy right now and another new employee starting on Monday. We cover a broad range of functions from labor relations, recruitment, compensation, benefits, health and safety, training as well. We manage 2 collective agreements that cover our unionized employees. There's a management bylaw that covers exempt staff such as myself. As well, we have to keep abreast of legislation such as the Labor Relations Code, Human Rights Code, Employment Standards Act, Community Charter to a lesser extent, but there's a lot of law involved in doing what we do. The City of Nanaimo is a provincially regulated employer, so we get questions a lot of times about federal matters and federal legislation that just doesn't apply to us. Things like the Canadian Human Rights Act don't apply. We have the BC Human Rights Code, so sometimes it's just key to make sure we know what rules we're following here in local government. The City of Nanaimo has a really long-serving workforce. I get the opportunity, the privilege to host the long service awards every year, and it's routine that we're honoring 25, 30, 35, 40, and more years of service with our employees. So there is turnover. We do probably 140 job postings a year, but in some of our areas, the turnover is pretty much just from retirements. People get in and then they just work their entire careers, move around to different jobs, and then retire at the end. So we have a total of about 900 regular employees, and then on top of that, we've got our contract instructors who work primarily at our recreation facilities, and paid on-call firefighters on Protection Island. We collect. Oh, thank you, Bill. Well, now here's the challenge. Where do you point this thing?
Oh, good point. Arrow to the right. Arrow to the right. Oh, it's just
Upside down.
upside down.
You got it upside down. Point at it.
It's still the one on the right.
Oh, the other one.
There you go.
Was that me or was that you, Calista? Well, we'll find out when we transition to the next slide here. So, the City of Nanaimo, we collect very limited demographic data on our employees when they're hired. We don't collect any demographic data on people that are candidates or people who apply on jobs. One, there'd be an absolute volume of information. Two, the law doesn't require that you collect a lot of demographic detail. We are required to collect some information for benefit purposes, and one of the challenges we have is we're still required to collect male or female data because the benefit companies are built on actuarial tables that are still based on male, female, gender being a binary concept. So the limited data we collect is really just for managing the employment relationship, the stuff that we have to track. When the government doesn't require you do something and you decide to go off and do it, you create exposure to risk and liability. And from the city standpoint, we're not prepared to take that on, no matter how laudable an objective might be. But in starting to track information that we are exposed on, it just gets a little dicey for human resources folks. I've been doing this a long period of time and was always drilled into me. You only ask a question if you're making a decision on what the answer is. And so, while some information might be good for tracking statistics and demographics, there's an inherent risk in doing so there. So while we can't be measuring diversity in the city of Nanaimo, it doesn't mean that we're not out there trying to promote it and encourage it. And I think that's even more key than measuring for a purpose right now, knowing the constraints under which we operate. Now we'll see which is which. So when it comes to our recruitment, we've got two different processes. There's an internal process and an external process. The internal hiring is, we've got a collective agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, so QP Local 401, and that provides certain job preferences for existing employees within the city. And the language that we have to work on there is the knowledge, skills, and ability to perform the work. And if that, if those are equal or relatively equal, then we look at seniority for existing employees. So a lot of our jobs, when we advertise them, they go internal, and there's movement around, and then we eventually get to an external posting once we've run all these internal competition processes. Some there's no qualified person when we look external. Some there's no interested internal person, we look external. When it comes to looking at external competitions, our keys are using the job descriptions that we work on with the hiring managers to make sure that we accurately capture what are the traits that you need in order to do this job. And the key is always drilling down to ensure, is it a bona fide requirement for that job? You can't do the job without that, having that qualification, that trait, whatever it might be. And when we get shortlisted candidates that we've identified, we go through and say, here are the posting qualifications we listed. Then we take our batch of candidates we receive and say, okay, we'll make like an Excel spreadsheet and say, okay, who meets all these requirements? Yes, no. And sometimes we have to drill down and find additional information because it's not quite clear. Once we determine who all the qualified candidates are, then we're out to find the best person among them, because we're spending taxpayer dollars and we want to get the city of Nanaimo value for the money that it's spending and it's entrusting us with. We rely on structured interviews, so we have preset questions for candidates. We ask everybody the same questions. We have interview panels set up in advance, so every candidate sees the same interviewers. We've done a lot with remote interviews over time, and that's definitely helped us see a lot more people a lot more quickly, and also to help cut down on might be some mobility challenges and people getting in for an interview, finding transportation to get there. We found during COVID we went with 100% virtual interviews, and it took a bit of getting used to, but we'd been doing them for years already, and so going 100% there wasn't that big of a leap. When we bring you in, you're going to be a manager. Let's say Darcy's going to be a hiring manager. She gets an interview binder, and in the interview binder, there's references to the Human Rights Code and making sure that people are aware of the prohibited grounds of discrimination and what they're expected to, how they're expected to judge candidates. If it's Darcy's first time coming in and interviewing with us, then she'll get a little more in-depth discussion with HR staff about what the Human Rights Code, means, and how why we might be interested if they have young kids, but we can't ask about that, and we shouldn't be basing a determination on that, just as an example. We've also developed this past year a little more HR-specific training for managers within the organization that covers off a lot of things, a little more in-depth on the Human Rights Code, on disability management, on respectful workplace, to make sure that we're trying to elevate the general knowledge level. And the way we build it for staff, for our managers, was to say, we want you to understand the why of the HR advice you get when you call into our department. And so I think it was effective in doing that. Over the years, the HR department has provided, we get called a lot to speak to different groups or provide information to organizations that support diverse groups on hiring practices and what it is we look for and what our processes are, and we've done that. We've never gone to the point of saying now we're providing preferential treatment to any group, because again, our goal has been provide equitable access for everybody, not preferential access for some. I know from the discussion I had with Laura Clarkson before coming here, said that Parks, Rec and Culture, actually they did a more in-depth outreach when they did organize their own job fair, and then got people through, but they actually did outreach to societies like Spinal Cord Injury BC, Nanaimo Pride, the Multicultural Society, to just try to build awareness of, hey, we're looking for people in these fields, and just to welcome applicants and build awareness. One of our other key functions is training. The HR department oversees sort of a corporate training budget, and that training is intended to be the type of training that would benefit anybody in the city can sign up to go to it. The training budget's spread among a lot of important initiatives. We like to put on training for people just to do their regular jobs well, like computer training and customer service. We like to have a component as well that's for the individual's health, well-being, and get-along skills at work. I know I've got a mental health first aid course coming up myself in next week, but a course on conflict resolution and time management, stress management. So there's a handful of those that we offer too, because we want people to find ways that we can support them in looking after themselves as well. We try and do our best to stay abreast of training initiatives, the new and latest thing coming down the pipe. We want our staff to keep knowledgeable on the world of work is changing, and we want to be able to change and adapt with it. We offer a certificate program through the University of Alberta called Indigenous Canada. It's a 12-week program that you can take and get a certificate at the end. And we've just recently identified another one called Indigenous Awareness Training, which is going to be available online and is going to be coming out for staff in, I believe, mid-April. On top of that, we also have regular lunch and learns with some local elders, and those are always well attended and usually held in this room as well. We've recently, we just had the 2S LGBTQIA+ customer service focused training this past week, and we've offered a few different sessions on just basic awareness, and those two have been well received. I know the session we had last week, we had half our community safety officers who were in here attending as well. So while they weren't out there on the street doing what they do, it was identified as something, this is something we want a little more about here. Just today was our Public Works Department, the sanitation workers, so the people who drive the refuse trucks, they have one day of the year that's their training day, because they're tough to pull off their jobs to get in for training courses like this. And Lauren Semple, who provides our 2S LGBTQIA+ training, was out there to do a session with just that group as well today. So what we find often is when Human Resources puts on one of these corporate training initiatives, we have other departments that say, hey, I'd like to use that for our department. I mean, Public Works is one example. Our IT department did the same thing just recently after the first session with Lauren. So it's well received, and it seems to be striking a chord with people. And that's, I think, one of the key messages here is, is building awareness. We're getting better. We're becoming better. Know better, do better. And I think that's where our tack is taking us. Departments also have their own training budgets that they can identify this training that is along this vein, and building understanding of diversity and equity and inclusion. And I think we've got some examples of that with staff, again, in Parks, Rec and Culture. They had a fairly large number of staff attend the Rick Hansen accessibility training webinar. 2 staff went on to get extensive additional training to become certified accessibility auditors. We've had staff receive training in land acknowledgement, so there's a broad scope there when we talk about inclusion, and it's great to see that there's a lot of different facets to that. Staff also have access to departmental funding for their own professional development, and what we find, if you go to a general human resources conference now, there's going to be a huge DEI component to it. And I know I've talked to people in other, in engineering and planning, and it's the same sort of thing. And it's building that awareness, and it's coming from a number of different avenues there, which is wonderful. When it comes to accommodations, in accordance with human rights legislation, it of course says you need to accommodate to the point of undue hardship. The departments, we're really supportive in providing accommodations, both for people who are trying to get jobs here and those once they get jobs here in the interview process. And we're trying to do better, finding new ways to communicate that out. I know we've revised some of our external messaging even just in this year to try to underscore that a little better than perhaps we have been. We communicate with prospective candidates via the postings that we provide accommodation to ensure applicants have equal access to the recruitment processes. Some examples that we've had, because some of the jobs that we have require a testing component, so you may come in and do the testing either before or after an interview. We've adjusted time limits for testing. There was a person who identified as having a learning disability, and so we extended the timeline there. Another person who came in and was, had one arm, and so needed a little longer in order to work their way through the testing material. We had a person who's, had vision challenges, and so we made the font larger to make the text a little more readable. And we've had a person who read test questions out loud to a person who was dyslexic, just in order to be able to help them get through it, because this comes down to what you know, not necessarily how you can put it down on a page here. So often once hired, candidates will then identify that maybe they have certain mobility challenges or something where an adaptive technology would be useful, either a speak device or a device that will read the text on the screen, whatever it might be. So when those happen, what we just do is we work with the department manager, IT, our health and safety manager. He's a great resource for this to try and find what the right fit is, and then look at getting that technology in place for people. Among our existing employees, we recognize that we've got an ongoing duty to accommodate to the point of undue hardship, and we want to make sure that when we know that a person is starting to identify some challenges, that we're on it fairly early, because we want to find a creative solution that continues to get the best value for the city's dollars and provides meaningful work for people. And I think there's quite often we're going to find the confluence of those two things and find some creative options to get some work done that maybe we hadn't necessarily identified at the outset. But again, we've got good people working on it when it comes to our attention. And sometimes some are a little more challenging, and you'll have situations if people are expecting, an ideal accommodation as opposed to a reasonable accommodation. But it is something we continue to work with. And it's not just in terms of, physical or mental, the continuum that we're trying to find accommodations. We've had a religious accommodation, we've had family status accommodations, like actually, codified, here's what the accommodation looks like, an accommodation agreement worked out with people. So they're new and different ones. In my, I don't know how many years now of doing this, I'd never had a religious or family status accommodation before, and it's nice to find those challenges and say, we can do this, because it was a little daunting at first. And I think, it's probably like that in any accommodation situation. How are we going to make this work? Well, if we take a step back and actually work together on it, we can often find what will work for us. Things that we're working on this coming year, we've got some colleagues that we sort of sat down and brainstormed and said, what does our work plan look like? We've got an extensive work plan in human resources, but the elements that touch on here, and some of the things you're going to say, wow, they're just getting to that. But until you actually have this conversation of what are you doing, you don't really realize there are some quick, easy wins that will move us along that continuum. I think our key has always been, don't be performative. Like, do it because it's what you feel and it's what you want to be doing. Don't do it because you're checking a box. And I think that's been a key for us. So we've identified that as we're switching to a new, to simplify it, because that's how I understand it best, a payroll, finance, human resources system, the data system, are the system, I guess. It's an ERP, but I always struggle over what those initials stand for. So, but basically our system where we put our employees, and it's one that pays everybody. We're in the position right now of converting to a new one. So we're able to find these things that, maybe we don't want to do this anymore. Like we've eliminated honorifics in our correspondence. And it seems like a simple thing, wow, they're just doing that. But if you're used to, it's Mr. Rose and Ms. Osborne and everything, when you have to change your mind on how you're thinking about those things and realizing it doesn't need to be in this system. We still do need to track gender, as I explained before, for benefit purposes, but we do have an opportunity to update some things there. We've updated both collective agreements to use inclusive language, and that was something we had support from both our IFF and QP unions on it. But fortunately, the QP agreement had more in it because it was a little longer agreement and built over a much longer period of time. The firefighter agreement, not so many things, because we would deal just with more neutral terminology. So, but it was good to be able to do it, and it felt like that was a good. We're trying to broadcast to the world how we want to be seen, and I think that's an important way of doing that. We're continuing to work with our benefit carriers on the issue of gender identification. With our sign-on forms, we're looking to be able to just even include, if right now it's only what's your name, but even to say what are your pronouns, and have it optional. There are people, if you want to disclose that, great. If not, and the key for us is going to be, okay, what are we going to do with this? Is it going to be something that we're able to put in this new system? We don't know yet, but it's information that it will be optional for people to gather. We're not going too far down the path of other demographic details right now, because again, there's inherent risks in doing so. But at least that is one that has obviously been identified as something that is important for a lot of people, and building towards something more there. So we feel comfortable and confident in doing that one. We're working to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy in the organization. And the way the municipal world usually works is you reach out to a lot of other local governments and say, what do you have? And then pull the best stuff from it. But again, to go back to my earlier comment, not to be performative. We don't want to have a policy and say, look, we got it, check the box. Now we're just backing off into the shadows here. It's a matter of what can we support? What is the City of Nanaimo's message on this? So it's going to take some time to develop it, but it is in the works. And right now we're in this sort of the research phase of that. As I said earlier in the recruitment section, we've updated our messaging out to candidates to sort of signal a little more, inclusion, a little more desire for diversity, and whether that's working or not, we won't know. but it will be interesting if we actually ever do hear from candidates. I've noticed your wording there. I'll be honest, I went on the VIU website and their recruitment section said, well, if you look at the City of Nanaimo and the VIUs, there's going to be a lot of similarities there, let me tell you that, because their messaging on it is really good, and I think it's something that, you know, our entire department, we got behind this and said, yeah, that is who our organization is, and I think they, you know, when someone does a good job of saying it, you don't need to change words for the sake of. When it's a good message, share the message. And lastly, we have an onboarding program for when new employees are hired. We send them some links to, here's some little training modules we want you to do. And HR keeps a really tight rein on what that is, because we want to make sure that it's stuff that we want people to know by the time they start here on day one, things that are important. And the diversity, equity, inclusion module is one that we're putting in that for people. We're also trying to be conscious of how much we're expecting people to do before they actually physically start with us. But just to sort of really get that message out there before you're coming in the door, you know, here's what we believe, come join us. So these are things that are going to be occurring over the year. I know that one is in the works right now. We're working with our IT department on it. And I think now we're ready for questions.
Okay, so I saw a question from Bay, and then Sean, and then Richard. Bay, if you have a question, maybe I'll go to Sean first because you're here. Sean?
My question was just to speak into the microphone, but you guys took care of that immediately anyways. So.
Thank you for that.
Yes, my question, thanks for the presentation, John. I'm glad you're looking for new challenges, because I have several. So one of the things that occurs to me that you mentioned is that preferential access is often challenging. We don't necessarily want that. We want equitable access. Some of the new information that's coming out, particularly out of the SRDC, talks about the need for, I don't want to call it preferential, but for customized opportunities for people with developmental disabilities or people who might miss out on traditional employment streams because they're not able to work 40 hours a week or they're not able to necessarily have access. So in that way, the equity does require some preferential treatment.
If I may,
yeah,
customization I see is very different.
Okay.
I think in the meeting, I forget how long ago the previous meeting was, but the issue came up about, you know, a person.
Microphone.
My apologies. A person, for example, looking at a custodial opportunity and said, well, I can't move between different sites, but I could do one here. That, for us, when I talk about reducing barriers, it's trying to identify what are some of these things that are hindrances, because for something like that example would be an opportunity for us to say, well, okay, there might be, you know, once we're aware of it, okay, we can work with, you know, our union reps and work with the operational managers to say, how might we craft something different? And yeah, it might be, it's not a, you know, 40-hour-a-week job. It might be, you know, 27.5 because you're just, you know, custodian at these two facilities and it's not full-time. But it's really sort of identifying what are the hindrances so that we can address them, but without knowing what a hindrance might look like. That's where we find ourselves, but that's sort of customization, and identifying it is a good tool for us. So if actually we don't customize.
Yes, and so to that point, I wonder if we can put back, I love creating work for people, the employment standards for the recruitment and retention of people with disabilities from the SRDC. The final version is out. It does have a framework on what those identified barriers are to find and recruit those people and to help them grow in those positions. I wonder if we can put that back as a, probably doesn't need to be a motion or anything, but just put it back as to recommend so that we can have some line items in this planning specific to people with disabilities. If we send that along, or
I would love to know this reference material you're talking about, because I'm not familiar with that.
SRDC is Social Resource and Development Canada, so they were contracted by the Government of Canada to provide recommendations on how to recruit, retain, and promote people with disabilities in workplaces. Okay. And so their stuff isn't inherently direct. There is separate stuff for the federal government, but that's not your purview. It's all very similar, but the SRDC provides overall recommendations for any organization that wants to have more inclusive hiring policies of people with developmental disabilities or any disability really. So it's a pretty comprehensive document that has some good frameworks. You can take or leave them as they're appropriate to the organization.
Well, I appreciate the reference. Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed that's missing from the training was disability-specific training. So there's some good training around Indigenous learning and awareness. There did seem to be some missing training around disability inclusion, and I wondered about, there were some resources in that document I just mentioned around that, and also connected to disability training. Something that's come up in a lot of the accessibility documents, both provincial and federal, is the Gender-Based Analysis Plus training. You're familiar with that?
I've taken that, yes.
Yeah, you've taken it.
Yes.
So are you planning on, so within the list of training, I think that's probably good training for all city managers to embrace, because while it is Gender-Based Analysis Plus, it's really about intersectionality, and it does have room for including people with disabilities and considering all of someone's lived experience within it. So within that list of training that you're rolling out, is there a consideration to have that be part of the training that's rolled out to all staff?
Realistically, it's...
Or I guess with city managers particularly.
Yeah, because I actually stumbled onto the GVA Plus training one day when I first that's why I was like, hey, someone else knows what this is, all right.
Yeah.
But it's really through this sort of process and by talking to people who have taken different trainings that we identify, can we explore this as a training initiative? So, and that one I recall, it was fairly brief to go through.
It's about half an hour,
yes.
Like it's pretty fast. I mean, 2 hours at the most if you're unfamiliar with the material. And then you can do some advanced training beyond that if you want to be able to audit processes to see where they fall within that. But even that's not too onerous.
Yeah. But even hitting this idea of intersectionality, I think is a good one.
It's very important, right? Because it means changes. So if you'd be, I wondered about whether you'd be exploring that as an addition to training for high-level staff to start out with, and then see if there's room to roll it out further, similarly to the Indigenous training.
I'll be talking with our training person tomorrow just on this, because I told them they would put a lot of work into helping craft this as well, so they're getting the feedback in the morning. So this is good stuff. I appreciate it.
Great. That's it.
Free stuff, yes. Brownies. We pay in brownies.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sean. We're going to go to Richard.
Hi there. I understand the reasoning behind not gathering the numbers or not asking questions in regards to self-identifications during the onboarding and recruitment processes. They are technically more conservative views on protection of identity and such. But I would like to say that if we're not able to quantify the numbers of people from marginalized backgrounds within employment, then we can't actually significantly tackle and measure growth within the organization of the city of Nanaimo. And so it doesn't really show a true commitment to try and foster positive change when it regards to inclusion, because you can have a whole bunch of white knights wanting to get involved, but if we don't actually tackle the problem of representation, then that's kind of problematic. I am kind of curious if there's any numbers in regards to the number of accommodated interviews possibly that HR had assisted with, because you gave a lot of examples, but I'm just kind of wondering if any of those numbers are taken into consideration too.
No, we don't have any sort of statistics on those sorts of things. You just kind of do them. And in terms of going back and asking for additional demographic details on people, you run into a lot of challenges with that. Some people, because if we're talking about a number of different elements we might be asking for, you're putting a lot of people in a situation of maybe not wanting to disclose information or not or not being truthful because they don't want to disclose, and some will not. I know some will make a mockery of the process. There's a human behavior, and you're going to have a small element of that. And then the challenge you run into is you're not going to have usable statistics from it. You'll have the legion of the committed that will follow suit on that. I will identify as a white cisgendered male. But if there's not enough people that are doing it, then in a workforce of 900 plus, if we have 147 that actually take part, is still not going to give us any better information than we have right now.
To be fair, that's a large what if scenario, and like that's basic research and surveying statistics information, right? But in any case,
yes, but for people that don't have to tell you this information,
yeah,
there lies our problem. So.
In Victoria, I recently saw that there are impact associate positions that were created, and these positions were specifically designed for ideally people with disabilities and diverse needs, diverse abilities. Has the city of Nanaimo looked at anything similar to these impact associate positions, or are you aware of them?
I'm not aware of them. The city, this has been a longer drawn out process than we've hoped it was going to be, but we're right now trying to find if there is an opportunity to explore partnering with an outside organization on even trying to create just short-term work to get people in, get some experience, get a City of Nanaimo name on their resume. But we're running into a couple of roadblocks with that. I don't have too much I can share on it right now because of the stage it's at. But to go as far as the City of Victoria, no, I'm not aware of those positions.
I would highly suggest the city looks at those positions that are currently available. They're going to be available till I believe tomorrow, and yeah, it would be really worthwhile investing in a position like that for each department. Essentially, these impact associates are people with diverse abilities being hired into a position into each kind of department, like public works, recreation and culture, stuff like that. And essentially, they'd be assessing each department and trying to improve the accessibility of the department, and both for employees and the public.
Thank you very much,
so
Richard. Yeah, I think John's written it down, and we're definitely going to look into that because it sounds very interesting. I'm going to go to Sean, and then in the interest of time, I think we're going to need to move on to the next presentation.
I just wanted to offer to John very quickly, I know you're familiar with the Nanaimo Association for Community Living. I'm working in management of their employment services, and we would love to support the city of Nanaimo. If you're looking at how you might work more closely with that, we're certainly interested in doing that ourselves. And we have some similar challenges to the city, just in terms of working with QP in a large system that's sort of entrenched and not super flexible. So we have a lot of the same barriers and challenges, but I know we'd love to work with you all and figure out how to help you make some progress and create some opportunities.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think the city in particular, we've got a fairly good working relationship with QP, and when we sort of identify, hey, we'd like to try something that might be a little different.
Yeah.
Engaging QP as early on as possible, I find that tends to lead to a lot more success than let's build a program and say, hey, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
So, thank you. I got a contact at NACL because I think one of my predecessor's predecessor was there for a while, John McNeil. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Van Horn.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your presentation today. Thank you. Okay, next up we have a report, which is an update on accessibility improvements to city parks and trails. Ms. Oswald?
Yes, we are wanting.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure.
Earlier we said it would be fine from the outside, but recognizing the challenges of the room, it is probably best to speak into the microphone, which is not very tall and needs slight accommodation for Lucy.
Oh, Kirsty, even more. Might as well get it ready for Kirsty.
That's right.
There we go.
All right, can everybody hear me? Excellent. We are very fortunate to have Kirsty McDonald, our Parks and Open Spaces Planner, back to share with us today information on accessibility initiatives that we are interacting with in our parks and open spaces. Kirsty was here a while ago and spoke to us on the Westwood Lake Phase 1 improvements, and I think we got some really great information shared during that session that Kirsty's been able to embed in some of our future planning. And it somewhat coincides with what Mr. Bryson brought forward early in the fall on facility accessibilities and improvements that we were doing in our facilities. So this is kind of the next step. There was interest at that time in us having more information and being able to work with Kirsty on what we could do for our parks. So she's put together a really fantastic presentation and is here today to share a variety of different parks that we're working on and to get information from you on ideas and suggestions you might have for accessibility and inclusion. So thank you, Kirsty.
Hi, everyone. This presentation is really supplementary information for the report, and it's divided into two sections, just like the report. The first is really focused on city plan and the integrated action plan that council has approved within the last 2 years. And a lot of these projects are approved and in process in various stages. And then the second section is what Darcy was referring to. It's a complement to what Mike was explaining was audits to upcoming facility audits. And we have a list of staff recommendations for some of the audit locations, but it's a really flexible list at this point, and it's based on also some of the comments that we've heard in recent meetings at this table. Just delayed. So just to start off, we're familiar with your work plan and just wanted to identify that both of these items, the A and the B, are both in your work plan, and so that's why we're here today. So starting off with the integrated action plan and city plan. The first is one that I was here, I think in September actually, and we did have a really fulsome discussion about Westwood Lake and the improvements there. We will bring those back to you or have a site meeting as more details are available, maybe in the summer. And we are working behind the scenes on some of the updates there, but this is a project that there is capital funding available for this year, and there'll be more hopefully in upcoming years. The integrated action plan identifies these items, completing improvements at First Beach, really focused on accessibility, and that's what you reviewed, as well as working with user groups around the trail system. And you'll see that that corresponds to one of the recommendations for an audit, the trail system at Westwood Lake, separate to the more highly used areas at the beaches. Also, with reference to Westwood Lake and Matthew Sutton Park specifically, but also in general, there are several policies and also actions in city plan and the action plans related to inclusive and accessible washrooms. And so Westwood Lake is one of the first sites that we will be looking at, not one of the first sites, but one of the current sites, of really redesigning the washroom to ensure physical and inclusive, gender inclusivity. We're also looking at installing a adult change station as well as child change stations in that new facility. And similarly, starting later in this year, we'll be working on RFSOQ, which is a request for professionals to send in qualifications and then start a design process to improve the washrooms at Matthew Sutton. And that will also, in the terms of reference, include an adult changing station.
Yay.
So this is a very much in flux, this design, but as you can see on the drawing here, it's a Westwood Lake, the kind of the first go of our improved washroom facility. And in the middle, there's quite a large space for an accessible family change room. And in that is that adult changing table as well. And at this point, it was a changing table that doesn't fold down. We've been exploring different options for the pros and cons of both and the space. This will be changing quite considerably as far as the efficiencies of the building design go, but the programmatic element of having that large open area with the changing facility will be included in the new iteration of the design. Again, just as I mentioned, Westwood Lake, after Westwood Lake is Matthew Sutton Park. And I think there's $3 million in the capital plan as of this year for design and construction by 2026 of a new washroom facility at Matthew Sutton Park that is inclusive and accessible. Another item in the integrated action plan is accessible beaches, and there's a number of improvements that have been made to date, but we want to do more in accessible beaches. So as you know, and Jocelyn, I think is in some of these photos, or you're in some of our photo shoots, the Moby mats have been installed at several locations. In the integrated action plan, we've also identified Loudon Park, Swilana Lagoon, and Westwood Lake as additional locations for some sort of accessible beach. So we're working through options for that at Westwood right now, but there is the potential to have them also at Loudon Park with the rowing club and washroom upgrades that are planned there, as well as Swilana Lagoon. I don't think that there's capital items necessarily at those locations yet, but we're working towards that. There's a lot of language in the integrated action plan around, what is this for? More beach access along the waterfront, the ocean waterfront as well, and having potentially the lagoon retrofitted again for additional accessibility as we discussed. And also the second picture is along the Queen Elizabeth Promenade at the foot of, was adjacent to the yacht club really, the foot, I think it's Rose Hill and Townsite, and looking at options to make that beach more accessible. There are limited options for people in general to actually touch the water in the downtown core, let alone if you've got mobility issues. Also, you may or may not be aware of, there's a park, it's quite a large, I think it's 12 acres in the hospital area called Beaufort Park. And there's been a number of local food production groups working on growing food in the park. And we've started to develop a trail network throughout the neighborhood that loops into these, but there is policy around ensuring that these are accessible wellness walkways to encourage a lot of the supported facilities in the hospital area, as well as potentially people that might be shut in the hospital to be wheeled out to the park. Because again, there's limited options for open space interaction around that hospital campus. So there's some policy around that. And again, that's something we'll be proposing in future capital plans. The Beban Park Master Plan is being implemented through a number of smaller projects. Right now, there's a couple of waterworks projects that are looping. You might have seen the Midtown Gateway and the replacement of the water line through much of Nanaimo, weaving its way through Beban Park with a paved trail that comes up against the 4 natural turf fields from Labio up to the main social center. And we have hopes to have additional trail network and looping of a really accessible trail network all through what currently is the barn area in the center of the park. So you'll see changes incrementally at that campus over time as different projects are realized. Oh, and also, with that group, there's also an internal facility upgrade, which I know has come up in previous discussions around the weight room and other accessibility improvements to the Beban pool and the I guess, indoor campus. And so that's very much part of the master planning for that site is looking at long-term what makes sense with the pool facility, and then making sure that inclusion is very much a focus of any changes that happen there. Another item that's in the integrated action plan focuses on having information available to the public about barriers and challenges in all of our fantastic parks before you get there. And so we've been exploring with IT how we can better have it so that you can know what the accessible areas and barriers are before you get to a site, as well as when you arrive at a site, there's some kind of a QR code or something that you can scan so that you know, oh, I can make it 3/4 of the way around Westwood Lake Loop Trail, but not the whole way if I'm in a chair, that sort of thing. So one of the pilot sites we've talked about implementing better information is actually at Westwood Lake in conjunction with the opening of First Beach and the improvements there. But we know network-wide we need to do that. It's, as you can see in, I think it was your attachment C, there's a huge number of parks in the city of Nanaimo. It's over 400 parcels. So having that information all up at once, it's going to have to be probably put online at different stages, and we're not sure how we're going to best meet the needs of the community through that at this time, but we'd love some input on that. And we do know that we need to get that out there probably a few years ago. Other priorities that we've heard in the past, we've heard a desire from the community to have trail riders stored at Westwood Lake and Matthew Sutton Park to allow people to get out on the trails in a different way. Not sure if that is still a community need or not, but that's something that we've heard through the Reimagine Nanaimo process. Also, we are reevaluating our design standards and our maintenance standards for parks and trails, and they're always in flux, but a lot of the current 2024 changes we're looking at are for visual accessibility and some physical accessibility too. So something, Jocelyn, I know you brought up about bollards, for instance, along the Parkway Trail in the past, or the placement of some of the no posts. There'll be more clarity on that so that there's less impediments, yet a vehicle is still not able to get down a trail. And also some look at the tactile visual strips that can be on stairs, things like that. And also the community has had an adaptive trail project through BC, I can't remember the acronym, but it's, Jocelyn, I think you were on the committee.
I was, yeah, it was called, it was including adaptive, but they had it was like included or inclusive. Inclusive by design, there you go.
So we're working with other community partners like Inclusive by Design to try and again have more information available on barriers, but also on the more regional scale, look at integrating with sports tourism and other markets where adaptive riding and inclusive riding is a real need in our regional system. So then moving on to the second section of the presentation, staff have put together a list of recommended accessibility assessments. And this is to couple on what Mike had mentioned about how some staff have received training through the Rick Hansen Foundation at auditing. And it's limited to only 2 staff at the moment, but there's options to either have those 2 staff go out and look at some select sites in 2024 and 2025, make recommendations, and then we would do future upgrades based on those recommendations in the 2025 and on budget, or having more staff receive training, and or have somebody independent come in and do those audits. So staff have heard through the committee previous conversations that the Westwood Lake Trail system is an area that would benefit from an assessment. And so we have included that on our initial list. We've also, through conversations with staff, thought that the Oliver Woods grounds may be a good location to include. It's a fairly small site that we can make changes on probably quite quickly. And the facility itself is very accessible, and we know that there are a lot of people of all ages with different abilities that use that site. And we think it's probably an easy win if we do that site, that we can probably make some significant changes in the short term. We also have, I think, a replacement fencing project in the budget this year. And perhaps if the gates are a limitation, and I don't know if they are, then that's something that through the new design we might as well have the lens and have it improved. Neck Point Park is one location, like many, where we can have some of the site be accessible, but probably not the whole site. There's a lot of natural barriers, and that's part of the beauty of that site, but there's definitely better information we can provide about where those barriers are, as we mentioned previously, and probably some ways that we can allow people to move through the site easier, through more of the site easier. Right now, you have to sign out a key at Bevan Park and put a deposit on it to get down to the middle portion of the park. And maybe there's other ways that we can still allow car access in if you do have a need to get into the park via car that doesn't require a key. But that's on our list for an assessment.
Is that bottom picture parking? Is that?
I'll try to go back. Is it parking?
Is that what it resembles, kind of thing? Talking about the parking at that point, or?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I think there's 2 accessible spots right now. I don't even know what the new location is called, but it was formerly called Indian Beach when you go into the end of the paved road, but you can only get through there by locked gate, and there's only two spots, and that allows somebody who is in a chair, has limited mobility, to get to a picnic table and a beach. And that's really the only way, is you have to have gate access.
Are there plans for, sorry to speak up, but with the parking lot at Neck Point right now, do we have plans to upgrade it? Because I know we're getting a lot of emails about the bumpiness, and that's a big accessibility issue at the park currently.
I'm not the expert on answering that, but I do know that it was graded I want to say a month ago, and I use that parking lot regularly and have noticed ruts really quickly after the grading happened, the professional grading happened and I know it's been in and out of the capital plan for paving for a number of years. I don't know if it's in or out right now.
Sorry to interrupt, thank you.
So the Stadium District is one location that we're having a lot more use at. This includes the running track and the new Q Stadium, as well as where the Night Owls play in behind NDSS. And so that has made our list just because of the increase in popularity, and really it's becoming a destination for the community to go. Harewood Centennial Park is also, especially with the new artificial turf fields, an even stronger destination. We have made a lot of ad hoc changes here for accessibility, including recent upgrades in the playground, but I don't think there's been a lens to the whole campus and how it would be to move through the whole campus if you were visiting it and had some diverse abilities. Again, Beaufort Park, we mentioned that there's policy around creating wellness walkways adjacent to the hospital here, and so this could also be an assessment site in the early days. And we also put Bowen Park on the list. I think it has come up at previous conversations in this committee. Also, this is highly used by our senior population. We were not thinking about the entire park. The entire park does have limitations based on the natural elements of it. We were thinking in the area around the complex that we might have some quick wins here, and it might be a good area to focus on. I think this is the last one, the waterfront walkway. We have not defined which portions of the waterfront walkway to focus on first, because this is it's 8 kilometers. It's a vast area for us to focus on. But we know it's probably the #1 visited park in Nanaimo, and so it could be on our list as a location. either in its entirety or in a concentrated location that this committee feels maybe would be a good location to focus on first. And those are our ideas as staff, but we wanted to really open it up to you to see how that resonates with you and if you have other ideas.
Okay, first up, we'll take a question from Wendy and then Jocelyn.
So, Bevan, I'm going to jump to Bevan. So when you go into the washrooms, the doors are always open, so someone who's visually impaired cannot feel the braille. So I feel there needs to be before the door, because the doors are always open, and there's braille on the back of it or on the front of it.
So this is in the social center?
No, Bevan. Bevan swimming pool.
The swimming pool.
Have I got the right one, or is it Bowen? No, it's Bevan. As you go into the washrooms, the change rooms.
Yes.
There's braille if the door is closed, but if it's open, there's nothing. So I was wondering if you're going to do something about that.
Great idea.
So that fits with the Bevan Master Plan.
Yeah, great idea. And I can see that insight alone being really useful for all the new washrooms that we're looking at. But that sounds like a really easy win for us to include in that assessment for the Bevan Park campus.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to Jocelyn, then Sean, then Bay, and then Nicole.
I have so much to say. I just wanted to first just shout you guys out for the new outhouse that's accessible at Diver Lake Park. We do an event there every year, and it's so nice to have like something in reasonable repair that is relatively easy to get in and out. It's on a level, like that was great. You mentioned the requests for trail riders, and I would sort of nudge that of a bigger picture to access to adaptive outdoor equipment that would enable people to, perhaps access parts of Neck Point Park that they can't access and that sort of thing. I have a bit of experience with this in Vancouver now. I know Tanel Bolt in Victoria has some experience with that, with her Radbox system. These can be really complicated, but they're super useful because the equipment is expensive. It's very hard to get a hold of, but it's sometimes the only way to make outdoor spaces a little more accessible. But it's a bit thorny. So I'm just saying if I can help, I would love to, provide some feedback or just share my experience and connect you with some other groups trying to do similar things.
And they would normally be stored on site. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yes.
For example, like I started an adopted cycling program in Vancouver, and we share a shipping container storage solution in Trout Lake Park in Vancouver. And there's all kinds of other things. The equipment is just like one tiny little piece of it. But I really want to see this happen. So however I can be part of that, and especially as the waterfront walkway becomes more usable and extended, I just see such great things for that. And I wasn't here when we had that first presentation on the progress for Westwood Lake Park, but I really hope that when you do an assessment on the trail system there, that you're, my experience with RHFAC certification is generally very positive, but I don't know how much of it is for outdoor spaces like those that have really specific technical expertise, technical requirements, and the Kootenai Adaptive has some really great trail specifications, and I would just suggest that your staff who go out and do those assessments, which is such an amazing thing to have on site, like have city staff who can do that, is just to invite a bunch of trail users, different types of trail users to join you, so that we don't have as many separated trails, so that, I ride an adaptive mountain bike, and I would love to be able to go from my home in near Colliery Dam to Westwood Lake, but I can't. I cannot get to Westwood Lake because of the gate, because of jumps and technical features, and I'm so excited for the day that that will be a reality. So I volunteer.
That's great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Sean?
Yeah, I just want to, and I love, the sort of progress that's being made. The last meeting we had, one of the things that came up was that there's a new RHF criteria. So it's 4.0. The staff hadn't been oriented to 4.0, so they hadn't been trained. They're still working on 3.0, and there's a lot of changes 4.0, particularly in terms of supporting people with neurodevelopmental disabilities and other things. And so one thing, like, I do love the idea of doing on-site assessments and having staff trained to do that. I wouldn't approve of, I guess I wouldn't sign off on any of it until we could be sure that upgrading to 4.0 was being expedited. So I don't know if that's something that we do in terms of a motion that say we can conditionally approve this plan to assess things pending an expedited push to get from council to have the staff go through and upgrade their training, or some sort of wording. Someone in legislative can fix that or help me fix that, maybe. But that would be something that's really important to me. I know that was something that Alexandria brought up in the last meeting, something that Linda brought up as well. So I just wonder, one, if if staff have already done that, and if they haven't, are there plans to do that before any new assessments? If you're not sure of that, can we require that?
So I don't know if staff have the 4.0. I did talk to Mike, and I know that the two fellows that have received the training are writing additional exams in July, but I don't know the details on that. I did look into options for additional staff to be trained, and it's not till the fall. So my guess would be that by then the 4.0 will be the standard. So the new staff that would be trained would be within that new realm. But we can also hire independent people to come in and do these assessments, and then ensure that their qualifications include the updated training, if that's.
Yeah, whoever does it, I think that they'd be trained on 4.0 would be. I don't know how other people feel about that. That's it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so I heard your desire for motion there. I feel like we're gonna look into it, and if it's seeming like something that.
Yeah, I think that probably not having it conditional on that. I think I heard from Christy that was already underway, and that it just is that there'll be consultation with ensuring that happens. And so I think, I'm not sure that we want to hold up the endorsement of this based on that.
Our preference would be to not do that, and we'll ensure that not only is the level of the assessment to the 4.0, but also as appropriate that we bring in stakeholders like Jocelyn mentioned to accompany us on the audits or do a separate engagement session on audits. And maybe we would look to this committee to have some input into who those stakeholders might be as appropriate. Because there's so much variation on these sites, and we do want to make sure that we're hitting everything that we need. Our eyes are fully open with the lenses that we need while we're doing these assessments.
But we would just ensure that your comments are noted in the minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Bay, then Nicole, Linda, and Alexandria, and then Tammy, recognizing we're in our last 15 minutes of the meeting.
Hello. There were just a few things. When you were talking about having some way to notify people about barriers in the park, and you mentioned a QR code, I just recommend adding a link in there that people can report barriers that they find while they're there. The other thing I wanted to bring up was in Bowen Park, there's a series of stairs that go from Millstone Avenue down towards the river. One thing is to just put yellow on the tip of the stairs because there's nothing underneath them. it's like a mesh, and so if your vision isn't great, you can't tell where the stairs are as you're moving through them. So it would be sort of a simple way to make it a little less dicey.
Thank you. And that's for just on that, that's one of those standard updates that we are making this year just on our municipal standards to have more visual cues like the yellow, I think they're called Twizzy strips, at the ends of the stair risers.
Okay. And the only other thing was it might be a while until the Swalana washrooms are upgraded, but the sinks are unusable. You cannot really wash your hands in those washrooms. So if there's a way to temporarily even put a sink outside, that would probably be helpful just for everybody in terms of health.
And is that the height of the sinks?
No, the taps don't even work really.
Okay, thank you. I will find out more about that. We're currently looking at 2026 build for the new washrooms, but that's still 2 years away. So thank you.
Yeah, it's you push it down and then it does like a second of water. And so it's very hard for people to wash their hands. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, Nicole. Looking a little frozen.
Through Wi-Fi? They're bad. Oh.
Okay. I hope you guys can hear me. I just in a list of stakeholders that parents of children
Your audio is coming through really garbled. Yeah, maybe if you turn your video off and just try to speak.
I'm gonna try turning off.
Yes.
That's better.
Yeah.
It's way better.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I was just thinking, in that list of stakeholders to have included in the consultations, to include some parents of children with both physical and other diverse needs, because I know in the development of the Swalana or the Maffeo Sutton playground, there are sometimes conflicting needs. Some families need some barriers from traffic and water bodies, but then putting up fencing can create barriers for other people. So really, whenever we're looking at these things, to consider washrooms relative to the parking, relative to the features that are made accessible. So when we're talking about quick wins, they're not really quick wins if somebody can use the bathroom or the parking, or they can use the playground, but they can't get to the washroom in between when they need to. So it's just, and I know that parks and the recreational facilities are sort of being assessed.
Oh, that's true. We lost you again there. Sorry, Nicole.
Separately, but I'm hoping that the two reports are being considered. I'm going to just leave it there.
I think just want to make sure we communicate.
That they inform each other?
Yeah. Yeah.
The assessments inform the capital planning, definitely.
But we can follow up.
And as far as her comment goes about the stakeholders that we involve in the assessments, there will be time, and so we can bring back this item if the committee would like, or we can just on email through Ledge Services maybe get some recommendations on participants. I know in previous, for instance, the Maffeo Sutton playground, we had Child Development Center, I think Island Adapt also had some members, and then also members of the committee that had children participated as well.
Okay, I'm going to go to Linda.
There you go. Learning to use Zoom still. I wanted to second the need for users being available or present when you are assessing anything. That there's such a diverse range of needs and abilities and chairs, and the more people that you can get, parents of children, deaf, blind, the whole shebang. And it's tough to have that eye to access for everybody, but the more that you include, the better it'll be. And as for version 3 versus version 4, anybody who's passed the test for version 3 has the materials for version 4 on the Rick Hansen website. They can download them. There's 3 or 4 training videos that point out the differences between 3 and 4. And there's a short exam you can write. So it's just not you shouldn't hold anything up for 3 versus 4, because that information is really easily available to the people that have taken the training. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Linda. So I've got Tammy, and for the second round, back to Bay.
As far as like recording the barriers, there is this website called the Blue Truck Travel that actually is like international, and so people that are coming to Nanaimo, they will be able to have access to that. But it's also like a way that you can look at what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're reporting it and when people want to report barriers. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
And we do still have on the city's accessibility website, there is a form to input if you encounter challenges in the city, and that sort of just exists all of the time. You can also call in with feedback if you don't want to write the form or add a voice memo. Alexandra, you have a first time question, then I'll go to Bay again.
Yes, to Sean's point on the Rick Hansen Foundation Audit Certification version 4.0, I just noticed that on our minutes from the previous meeting on page 6, committee discussion took place regarding the new rating version and ensuring any new city facility audits be conducted with the most recent version applied. So we're covered for that.
Yes, appreciate you bringing that up, because I know that we had talked about it, but it sounds like there's access to the training for those. Yeah, and I think doing the walkthroughs of the indoor facilities as well with stakeholders would be really important in the meantime before we do the outdoor stuff. Thank you. Bay, you have another question? Nicole's trying to say.
Apologies, the hand just didn't get lowered before.
Okay. Maybe I'll ask a question just about the design of the washrooms at Westwood Lake. I wonder, would the doors be automatic? And I noticed them opening inwards. Is that sort of like a standard thing that for accessibility is good? Because I know that requires more space in the washroom to be able to navigate around the opening door.
I'm not sure why the architect has chosen that specifically. I think I don't know if it's the push button or we can explore that further, but we are really making a lot of changes to that design that was on the screen. But I'll raise that next time that we meet with the architect. I know that we typically do leave the doors wide open, as Wendy had mentioned, when they're open. And we've also had some conversations around the impacts of heating and different things when the doors are open. But that is our standard, that when they're unlocked, they are held open.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I think if the design of the washrooms can come to committee before it goes to council for approval. I don't know if council even approves the design of washroom facilities. That's maybe not even something that we get into.
I don't think the details will go to council at that level. It'll be more the timeline of how we're progressing.
Okay, we'll make sure the money is there, and then the committee can have feedback on the design. Jocelyn?
Yeah, I would love to have, like, you don't want to hold things up too far, but I'd love to, given there's lots of change in that design, to see, because things like whether there's power doors or not, and those thorny issues of, like, the heating on the inside and who might want to, like, take shelter there and all that kind of stuff. that's where all those need conflicts really come into play. And, we're not necessarily experts in design, but we're experts in our own use cases. So I appreciate us being involved in that level.
One idea that we did have is that when the design is at the right stage, which would probably be June, July-ish, that we would love to do an on-site, and that presents issues itself, but either an on-site or a workshop maybe with the committee where people that want to participate can really look at the nitty-gritty details before it goes to into construction, which is right now on track for the fall of 2024. That could change, but that's what we're aiming for.
I see Linda has another question.
I wanted to recommend, I've worked with many architects on many bathrooms, and unless you've got someone who specializes in accessibility, they will miss lots of things. There's a book called Building Better Washrooms by our accessibility consultant at VIU. She's in Toronto. I mean, she's not ours. She's a accessibility consultant. And they've tried to provide as many scenarios as they can in that book. So it's available on Amazon. It's written by, she's an engineering tech, RHFAC, CSA code writer or standards writer, a person who uses a wheelchair, and an architect. So the three authors all get together. And that'd be a really inexpensive resource for the city. And I would too like to see the plans before they go forward.
Thank you, Linda. I see all of us writing that down right now. And Tanya?
I too would like to see the plans, and I would concur that on site with, even if, I hate to say it, but if we did it in shifts, if that meant that more people could come, like say from 10 to 11 group A and 11 to 12 group B kind of thing, because even two people with a similar wheelchair, like for myself, I'm going to use Jocelyn and myself as an example. Jocelyn is in way better shape than I am, and my chair's a little bit heavier, but she knows how to use a bike. I don't, so there are differences even if they're both manual wheelchairs, for example. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate the feedback, everyone. Any last minute questions before we wrap today's meeting? Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentation.
Do we need to approve this recommendation?
And yes, we do need to approve this recommendation. Thank you, Sean. So may I have a motion for the approval of the recommendation? Moved by Jocelyn, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Okay. And any opposed? I see that carrying unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, under other business, briefly, Karen.
Yeah, we have one further topic just prior to other business, which was the assistive hearing devices update.
Pardon me. Sorry.
By Dorothy.
All right, Laura Clarkson and Carrie Ng. Laura Clarkson is our business service manager for Recreation and Parks, and Carrie Ng is our manager for IT services. They've been working on the assisted hearing devices project. As you remember, you brought it forward in June of this year, wanting a committee of people to look at what the options would be and the benefits of installing the hearing assisted technology. That committee came back to see and provide information in the November 20th ACAI committee meeting. And at that point, a motion was made, and that motion was that council approve the implementation of the following pilot project subject to funding, which is the installation of a hearing loop at the front counter at the two city facilities, an adaptive sound field system in the Service and Resource Center boardroom, that's here, and direct staff to return to a Finance and Audit Committee meeting to determine funding options. So staff went back to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting on February 21st, and at that time, the Finance and Audit Committee recommended that Council approve the assisted hearing device pilot project fund up to $10,000. And since then, staff have been working with our purchasing department, and as of yesterday, March 12th, the order was placed for the technology needed to implement those devices. So wanting to give you that update and let you know that hopefully by the time we're back in 2 months, we'll have a further update of devices hopefully being received and installed. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you so much, Darcy. Thank you, I appreciate that. So now we're gonna go to other business. Karen has an update.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know on the committee that John Cowan had put in his resignation. He's wishing the committee success in future endeavors. So we will be posting in I think the newspaper next week, Alyssa. We're hoping to get this in. And so we'll be looking to advertise to fill that at-large position. So also if you know anybody, please encourage them to apply. And yeah, so we'll hopefully get that filled fairly quickly.
Excellent, okay, thank you. And question period, I don't believe we have any on today's sheet. So thank you for all of your comments today. Wendy?
Just one thing I just want to mention, wherever I go with my children, they look and, this is not accessible, this is not accessible.
You're raising them right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so just pointing out that we've got a lot of work to do, and yeah, that's why the work of this committee is so important. And with that, we have a motion to adjourn. Okay?
Everybody.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Transition.
Thank you.
We adjourned that.